Welcome to Africa News. Coming up, in the Central African Republic, the United Nations pointing the finger at Chadian soldiers over a marketplace massacre in Bangui. We'll have the latest with our reporter there, James Andre, after the withdrawal of Chad's troops. 3 suspected cases of Ebola reported in Mali amid ongoing warnings of an unprecedented outbreak of the virus in West Africa. As Rwanda gears up to mark 20 years since the genocide that killed up to 1 million people, we reported the memories of a killer and a survivor who are now a couple. We start in the Central African Republic as the United Nations inquiry says Chadian soldiers killed 30 civilians in an unprovoked attack in the capital Bangui, that when they fired into a busy market last weekend. Chad claims its soldiers were attacked by militia as they sought to evacuate some of the city's few remaining Muslims. The country's now pulled its peacekeepers out of the city in protest at claims they aided last year's primarily Muslim Seleka uprising. Central African Republic has seen a wave of interreligious violence since the rebels ousted President Francois Bozize last year. Julia Seeger has more.
These Chadian soldiers are waiting to take off on Bangui's tarmac. Their departure comes as the UN released a damning report, accusing them of having shot and killed 30 people and injured more than 300 in an unprovoked assault on civilians a week ago in a northern district of Bangui.
According to the people we talked to, regular Chadian army troops who for some reason came into this area and started shooting indiscriminately. That's what we're hearing from the witnesses.
But according to the head of the African peacekeeping force, MISCA, the Chadian troops had come to the area to evacuate Chadians and Muslims when they were ambushed by the anti-Balaka Christian militia.
The convoy was attacked by those we call anti-Balaka. So when the UN says Chadian troops entered a marketplace and started shooting, I can't believe it.
Chad pulled more than 800 of its soldiers out of the African force on Thursday. Speaking on set here on France 24, the Chadian foreign minister said his people had done enough to help its neighbor.
For the last several months, there has been a malicious campaign against Chad and its soldiers. And even the Chadian people living in the Central African Republic have paid the price. Hundreds, perhaps thousands of Chadians have been killed.
Chadian soldiers have been playing a key role in the ongoing peacekeeping efforts in CAR. But they've also been accused of violence and of siding with the mainly Muslim Seleka rebels. Nonetheless, their withdrawal is a heavy blow for the Central African interim government.
We learned with a lot of regret the withdrawal of Chadian troops, both from the MISCA and the Central African Republic.
Chad's withdrawal comes as the European Union agreed to send some 800 soldiers to CAR to help quell the violence. They'll work alongside soldiers from the Sengaris mission who are being deployed in the eastern part of the country.
A little earlier, I spoke to France 24's James Andre in Bangui, who witnessed the Chadian pullout.
Started this morning, so less than 24 hours after this surprise announcement by the Chadian government, and it started with a plane of 40 policemen leaving the tarmac here in Bangui. Then it was another plane with a couple of tanks on it. We were there, we actually witnessed that firsthand. And then this afternoon it was a convoy that left the base of Mpoko right next to the Chadian airport. On that convoy there were 200 Chadian soldiers in 30 vehicles. This was basically quite a high-risk convoy in the streets of Bangui, and our crew followed it all the way out to Picadous. There was a very impressive security system around it, including tanks. All the segments of the road had been protected by various MISCA contingents who had made sure that no anti-Balakas would be able to attack this convoy. And indeed, well, despite quite a bit of tension, we did see that convoy leave the city without any incident. It's very important here to stress that for most of these Christian neighborhoods, for most of the residents of the Christian neighborhoods that was crossed by this convoy today, it was a relief to see these Chadians go, as you said earlier. Indeed, the Christian community here has been accusing the Chadians of siding up with Seleka and then with the Muslims. And of course, this pullout comes 1 week after a Chadian contingent of the MISCA was indeed ambushed in kilometer 12, an area here in Bangui, and indeed had to fire back, killing a lot of people indeed.
Elsewhere, John Kerry's been continuing his tour of North Africa after yesterday's visit to Algeria. The US Secretary of State was in the Moroccan capital Rabat this Friday, where he paid tribute to a country which he praised for its role in regional stability and prosperity. Kerry nonetheless sounding the alarm bell over ongoing social challenges, including a 30% youth unemployment rate. Mali says it's detected its first possible cases of Ebola, adding to fears the deadly virus is spreading across West Africa. 3 people have been placed in quarantine after suspected infections near the border with Guinea, where the outbreak originated. More than 90 people have died there, and in neighbouring Liberia. Let's take a listen now to some concerned citizens in the Malian capital, Bamako.
If the illness has already contaminated Mali, then it's a worry for everyone.
We even begun to stop shaking hands, to not greet people too much, and not get close to people who you don't really know.
In South Africa, embattled President Jacob Zuma could face another inquiry into his taxpayer-funded home upgrades. This is the opposition Democratic Alliance says it's confident the Revenue Service will investigate whether Zuma failed to pay tax on non-security related upgrades. The controversy over some €17 million worth of public money comes just weeks ahead of South Africa's election. Now, Rwanda is gearing up for commemorations to mark the 20 years since the genocide that killed up to 1 million people, most of them ethnic Tutsis. Our reporters, Catherine Norris-Trent and Willie Bracciano, went to the capital, Kigali, to look at how life has changed there in the past 2 decades. They found reconstruction and reconciliation, sometimes to an almost astonishing extent. Here's their meeting with a married couple profoundly marked by the tragedy.
Kigali, 20 years after the Rwandan genocide. We're in the bustling neighbourhood of Nyakabanda, where Emmanuel has lived most of his life, apart from the 8 years he spent in prison.
When we used to come here in 1994, there were people dying, corpses all over the streets.
Emmanuel was convicted of killing during the genocide. He admits murdering some 60 people with the death squads, the Interahamwe.
They posted us at roadblocks and ordered us to kill Tutsis. They'd go into houses, get them, and then kill them in the streets. I was with them. We were all together. They used to call it working.
Emmanuel is far from proud of his past and wants to show us just how much he's changed. He takes us to meet his wife, Vestine. She's not only a Tutsi, but a genocide survivor. She was 8 years old when most of her family were murdered.
I didn't only see my parents die, but many other people too. They were killed with machetes or with clubs studded with nails. It was awful.
But she's been able to move on and doesn't even seem to blame her husband. He's repented, she explains, and in any case wasn't an instigator, but was caught up in the violence.
I've been living with him for a long time. It's obvious that he was forced to act in the way that he did. If he'd done it of his own free will, I wouldn't be able to live with him because he would be cruel with me.
When the couple met in the late 1990s, their relationship raised eyebrows on both sides.
In the beginning, when we lived together, there were some Hutu neighbors who said, "How can you love this Tutsi woman? Have you forgotten already that it's the Tutsis who put us all in prison?" And I had to tell them, "Let that go. It's in the past now."
Emmanuel says he's completely reformed since his darkest years after prison. He was afraid of being rejected by his community and a heavy drinker. He's found salvation now at an evangelical church, where he even preaches to the faithful.
If someone does you harm, don't take revenge for the hurt he has caused you. Forgive him. That is what our God in heaven asks of us.
Emmanuel and Vestine are a rare example, a marriage between a genocide survivor and perpetrator. But 2 decades on, mixed relationships are becoming ever less taboo. Talking about ethnicity, Hutus and Tutsis is instead, as Rwandans work to put the past behind them.
You can watch the full report, Kigali Revisited, airing first at 8:40 p.m. Paris time on Sunday. It'll be broadcast throughout next week as well. And on Monday, we mark the anniversary of the genocide in Rwanda with a special edition of African News live from Kigali. Do stay with us here on Live from Paris. Rochelle Ferguson will be back very shortly.
Special event.
20 years after the Rwanda genocide that claimed the lives of over 800,000 people, has the reconciliation process succeeded? Torn between forgiving and remembering, today's new generation never experienced the massacres. How are they coping? France 24's special day of programming is devoted to the rebuilding of the country of 1,000 hills.
Watch events unfold on France 24 and France24.com.